we have the finale of this trilogy. Do these things and you will never be successful. Part 1 went down a tree. Do these things and you'll never be successful. Part 2 went down a storm. And now we are about to finish the trilogy, which is do these things and you will never be successful. Part 3. And the first thing we're going to talk about is something that you have a lot of experience in, isn't it, Lewis? This is something that was a big part of your past and a big part of your level of experience and has contributed towards the person that you are today. And overcoming the first thing that we're going to talk about is no easy feat. And you talk from experience in that field, don't you?
Yeah. So guys, the first one in this trilogy of do these things and you never be successful is alcohol and drugs. And I thought about, shall I share this one? Because for anybody that doesn't know, I went through rehab. I had a lot of background in drug and alcohol abuse, and it got bad. I was having seizures, like epileptic seizures, essentially fits from the alcohol abuse. I was blacking out. I was drinking for like 6 months straight. I was taking drugs for, cocaine for 7 years. This isn't just dabbling on the weekends a couple of times for, 6 months. This was like a huge part of my life. And I won't go into all the details of it, but I wondered whether or not I should share this or not as a point, because I've never really wanted to be that guy that tells everybody to live their life based on how I wanted to live my life. Because in all honesty, let me just be completely honest. If I could drink, I would. That's as simple as that. I would. It's not like I don't want to drink. I just know that it doesn't work with me. Like when I drink, I take drugs. When I take drugs and I drink, shit goes wrong all the time, every time. And I've learned enough. Well, I didn't learn for a long time and then eventually figured it out. I never wanted to be that guy that's preaching and saying to everybody else, oh, you shouldn't drink, you shouldn't take drugs. But at the same time, I would be completely lying if I didn't say it hasn't had an absolutely monumentous impact on my life. Because it's difficult when you're trying to take 2 steps forward and you're always taking 3 steps back, and alcohol and drugs do that. They get you into trouble. You spend your money, you feel shit. You have these energy peaks and troughs, after a hangover, especially as you get into our age now. I don't know, but I should imagine if you have a hangover now, it can write you off for maybe a day or even 2, or even, I guess, sometimes even 3 for some people. How does it, how do you,
mate, you know what? I've got an unusual relationship with hangovers though, because honestly, they've always been bad for me. Always. Even when I was 18, I got really bad hangovers. The only one time in my life where my hangovers weren't that bad was my first year of university, when I was getting drunk every day. That was the only time, because I was just getting used to it. Like, I got to a point where I could genuinely neck like pretty much a whole bottle of vodka to myself. And I'm talking like a fucking liter bottle of vodka before going on a night out. And I would be bladdered, right? I would be smashed on the night out. And the next morning I'd wake up with a little bit of tension in my face and my head, but I'd actually be okay. However, that is an unusual time in my life because it was first year of uni. We're getting drunk all the time. It was a big part of the culture. But for the most part, mate, I get horrific hangovers. Like, I get this really awful pain in my eye. I get a really bad migraine. And that's the worst of it. I need to sit in a shower for a decent fucking 6 hours straight after I've been out drinking. Otherwise, I can't function. I just can't think. I can't move.
Oh, that sounds awful.
It's awful, mate. I get terrible hangovers. And I always have done.
With alcohol and drugs, there's so much to it. And, I could speak for months on this because I've gone through a lot of rehabilitation. I've done a lot of 12-step recovery meetings. I've sat around drug addicts and alcoholics for years, listening to stories and relapses. And it's taught me a lot about mindset and personal development. It was the foundation in which, I learned about a lot of my transformative type abilities, because I saw people's breakthroughs. I saw people's relapse. I heard their stories. I learned what was holding them back. I learned their triggers. I absorbed it all. And I used that as a great human foundation to understand people. I could speak about it all day long, but there's so much to drugs and alcohol, and it strips you back of so much. Because I tell you the biggest thing, it denies you the opportunity for real growth, because you're always running away from something. And that something is yourself. Like, you're escaping from yourself rather than working through that tension, rather than working through that stress, rather than working through that lack of clarity or that dissatisfaction with yourself or your life. people tend to numb that with drugs and alcohol. And what that does is it prevents you from ever really looking at the issue, because you're always numbing it and you're not really allowing yourself to feel it and work through it. So I think you suppress yourself. You don't get a chance to explore yourself. You're always running from yourself. In my life, it caused me to do fucking stupid shit. And I think we can all relate to doing something stupid on drugs and alcohol. But even if they're small, spending money that you could have invested in a coach, right? It seems quite small. That could be the difference between your life changing or not. If you've got, I mean, I've spent, 200 quid on Friday night, six weekends in a row. I mean, you've already got enough money for a coaching program there that could completely change the trajectory of your entire future. Your decisions are really important and really powerful. And you don't make good decisions under the influence of alcohol and drugs. And you don't make good decisions on the after effects of alcohol and drugs. Because when you're lying in bed hungover on Monday, like still feeling a bit shit, all you want to do is just get back to feeling how you do. Your diet's gone out the window. The course that you started is left in your inbox and you haven't even bothered opening it. And just everything just seems a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
And without the alcohol, without the drugs, myself personally, there's been a lot of contributing factors, but I've felt unstoppable ever since. Like it's the best thing I've ever fucking done. And it's fucking hard work. And it's almost near enough impossible to give up. This is a bit of a limited belief and a little bit negative. But I think if someone's in that lifestyle of drinking, it feels almost impossible to give up unless you've got a real reason to do it. It got so extreme for me that I was ending up in prison multiple times, and I was having epileptic seizures and getting my teeth knocked out and my jaw broken and slashed with a knife, and, getting in debt and falling out with friends and family and, girlfriends. And it was just like complete and utter chaos to the point where it was obvious. And I was like, I'm going to die if I carry on. But I think it must be very, very difficult for a lot of people to make a decision to remove such integral parts of their life when it's been their crutch for so long. It's been their social crutch. It's been their ability to go and meet with friends. There's not fucking much else to do in the UK. It's their ability to escape from the self, to build that confidence. Because that's another thing. When I mentioned escaping from yourself, I was talking about primarily the sort of negative things, more so the stress and the lack of clarity. And rather than sort of figuring those things out and working out who you are and what's causing that stress and what you want from your future, you just numb it away. But also it's a bit of a cheat. Like I see alcohol specifically as a cheat. People want to feel confident, so they go out and they neck a bottle of vodka instead, rather than working on their confidence. That was a challenge, building up that confidence. And to be honest with you, I don't think you ever quite get it. It's the level you do when you're on fucking cocaine. I'm joking, no, but vodka as well, or any alcohol. Like it is a very extreme hack essentially to feeling the way you want to feel. And that's why a lot of people do it, because they just want to feel a certain way. But it denies you the possibility of growth. Say, for example, you wanted to lose weight and you knew that walking up the stairs rather than taking the lift is better for you, right? But every time you get to the lift, you go, oh, not today. I'm just going to go up in the lift today rather than walking up the stairs. If one day the lift wasn't working anymore, it was out of order, and then you decided to take the stairs, it's something you wanted to do anyway, but now you've been able to get the benefits from it. So it's quite hard to explain that one. But it's like sometimes when we've got that crutch, we'll always take it. If we've got this easy way of getting our confidence, we'll drink to get confident. We'll drink to be brave. We'll drink to be sociable. But when that's taken away, you're left with no other option but to actually do something that's more sustainable, more beneficial for you, i.e. like walking up the stairs and, sorting out your health. And working on your confidence is much more difficult, but it's much more rewarding because it allows you to become a better person rather than this illusion of a better person with a substance in you. So it's a complicated matter, and I've rambled on a bit there, but I genuinely believe, just from my experience, that without drink or drugs, your emotions will be regulated, your feelings will be regulated, your mind will be stable, you'll be able to work on yourself more, and you'll make better decisions, you'll have more money, and overall, it's been one of the catalysts to improving my life significantly.
Definitely. Well, inhibiting is the word that really jumps out to me when we talk about drugs and alcohol. And that is really what it is. It's inhibiting. Like in the immediate moment, you get that rush of confidence, you get those different emotions, you change your identity in that immediate moment for a very, very short amount of time. It's like instant gratification 101, really, isn't it? But then the after effects of that, which can be fucking life changing, are negative after effects. You know, if whether we're talking about fucking being hungover every morning or at least every week, whether we talk about the after effects of doing too many drugs and what that does to your fucking mindset and your brain and your body and your outlook. It's like the reward is this, and which is a very small amount, and the fucking payback that you have to give is this, which is a huge amount. And you mentioned there about the crutch, and what's really interesting is, with the analogy used about the lift, it's like if the lift is out of order, there is nothing you can do about it. You have to take the stairs. How do you feel people can get themselves to that point when the crutch that they've got, the drugs and the alcohol, is available to them, but they have to convince themselves that the lift is out of order? They have to convince themselves it's no longer available to them. They have to do their own work to get to that point.
That's why I'm saying it's near enough impossible to do it unless there's a real fucking reason for it. Because I've seen it. I've seen in my rehab while I was in there, a guy hung himself off his shoelaces in the rehab. Like, this is the toughest work you can ever put yourself through. Like, there's been 3 people that I was in rehab with that are now died from overdosing. And there's been many more. Like, it's such a challenging thing to do because you're left with yourself. No escape, no drowning, no numbness, just you. And that sometimes can be a really painful thing. Awareness can sometimes bring a lot of pain. You know, sitting with yourself, being aware of your actions and your behavior and yourself as a person. It's not something people want to face up to a lot of the time. And alcohol is such an easy way out. And because people have integrated that with their life so comfortably and almost so, you know, so normal within society, that they're used to escaping from their self so often they never really get to know who they are.
Yeah.
And it's like being faced with that is fucking hard work.
Think about what we talk about a lot, especially throughout this series of, like, if you want to be successful, and all of the things that we talk about on many of the episodes: identity, knowing yourself, being at home with yourself, being cool with yourself, loving yourself. You know, these are all contributing factors towards being successful and being happy, you know. And if you don't have that relationship with yourself whatsoever, in fact, to the point where you want to avoid yourself like the fucking plague, you can never really be successful, because you can never be happy and at home with who you are, which is a huge contributing factor towards success.
And someone said something to me very recently. It was really good. And it was, what would you prefer? A small chapter of pain or a lifetime of misery? And it's like, wow. If you're always running from yourself and you're numbing the pain and you're escaping and you're just trying to use external substances to change the way you think and feel about yourself, which is the reality. And people may mask that as having a good time, letting off steam. But the reality is, for most of the time, there is something deeper. And of course, this is different on a case-by-case basis. But the process of looking at yourself and getting yourself to the point where you no longer require those substances to be able to feel confident, to be able to be sociable, to be able to have a good time, to be able to feel good, think good about yourself, is difficult. And I'm never going to tell anyone that it's not. It's real hard work. It was tough, like really tough, like mind-bending tough. But once you sit through that, then you allow yourself to not live the life of misery because you've worked through it, you know. And for anybody who's sitting here thinking, oh, I sort of can identify with the fact that I probably escape from myself on the weekends and things like that, I just want you guys to realize that it's not uncommon to feel like that. Like, there is so many people that I speak to that feel this internal void, this missing piece, this irritating and restless discontent with themselves and with life. And when you feel like that, your body and your mind are looking for ways to solve that pain. They're looking for ways to feel better, and you will look for it outside of yourself. Mm-hmm. It's inevitable that you're going to be looking for solutions, either consciously or subconsciously. How can I make myself feel more complete and more whole? And the easy go-to thing is the thing that everyone else is using, you know, these external substances, whether it's alcohol or drugs, or whether it's not even a substance. Maybe it's just something that makes you feel good, whether it's sex, whether it's compliments, whether it's shopping, whether it's gambling. They're all the same thing. They're all trying to fix the way you feel. That's why they call drugs a fix. I need a fix. I need a fix. Because they're trying to fix themselves. So I want you guys, if you identify with this, to not think, oh, I need to go on this sobriety trip, because that might not necessarily be the answer. Because actually there's something called a dry drunk, by the way. I don't know if you've heard of that before, but it's someone who becomes abstinent but still feels like fucking shit because they haven't done any work on themselves. You know, there's people that just go, I'm never drinking again. And there's people that go, I'm going to work on myself to the point where I no longer need a drink.
Sure. Yeah.
you
There's
know?
a big difference, really, isn't there? And that's something that's not spoken about nowhere near enough, because I've never heard that term and that idea has never actually crossed my mind. Me, someone who's in the mindset space and coaching
Mm.
space, the difference between those two people, I'm never drinking again, or I'm going to work on myself until I don't need a drink. That's never even crossed my mind. So
Yeah.
that is something that needs to be spoken about a hell of a lot more.
Because what you'll find is people just latch onto other behaviors. So they won't drink, but they'll still, and this might sound stupid, like funny to you, but I've seen it so often. Like people might stop drinking, but they'll take up cocaine.
Right. Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
honestly, I've seen things like that in the AA meetings. Like they're going, "Yeah, I haven't had a drink in 4 weeks, so I've been having a little sniff." But you know, it's like it's the beating the object slightly. And I'll tell you what, I might even have to hold my hands up that I might have slightly pivoted into obsessive work. That's the truth, you know, because I have got obsessive and compulsive tendencies, and you know, I have always been like that, and it's something you've got to be aware of. But yeah, the key takeaway of this, we could actually do a whole episode about this. If you feel like there's part of you that needs that fix to feel complete, to feel whole, to feel better about yourself in some way, rather than trying to fix it with something outside of yourself, try and look with how you can fix that thing internally, how you can build that relationship with yourself. What is that irritability with yourself? What is it? You know, what is your body telling you? Listen to this. This is your body and your mind trying to tell you something. It's like, we don't like this. We are not happy here. Like, you don't treat yourself nicely. Rather than going, right, shut up, don't talk. And then like, it's getting louder. Right, there's the vodka. I need to drown this voice out. When you have these feelings, work through them rather than avoid them. That's the key here.
Definitely.
Because if you feel like you need alcohol and drugs right now, I can promise you it was a massive part of my life. It was a huge part of my identity. And I genuinely didn't believe I could live life without it. Like, I would think about, how am I going to go on a date? How am I going to like celebrate my wedding day? Like, what am I going to do for fun? Because I used to associate drinking with fun with happiness. And I was like, I'm never going to have fun again. I'm never going to be happy. But then I realized much later on that fun doesn't even equal happiness. Happiness equals happiness. And you don't have to have fun to have that. You know, when you're younger, people latch onto all these sort of recklessness type behaviors as associations to fun, but there's just so much more to life. And I was blinded by it and numbed by it and never able to go out and create a decent life for myself because I was living in this bubble with this, you know, alcohol and drug illusion that I was having a time of my life when in reality, I was sitting in a dingy old flat. Yeah. And I thought that was fun. My life is much better. I feel much better. Everything is significantly better. I'm much more successful, got much more money, got much more freedom, got much more fucking everything. Yeah. The moment I decided to cut that shit out of my life. That's my story. That's not everyone else's story. But for anyone that needs to hear that, I hope that helped.
Yeah, definitely. Because if you think about it, it's all on different levels as well. Like we might be talking to people who are listening to this podcast who aren't necessarily at the stage where they're drinking themselves into oblivion or they're doing too much drugs and they're getting into lots of trouble. But there is one thing that everybody can relate to on some level, which is it does inhibit you, even if you're doing it a little bit or you're doing it a lot. Right? It inhibits you a lot if you're at the point where you can't fucking walk every day because you're bladdered drunk all the time. But it also inhibits you when you're just hungover once in a fucking blue moon. Yeah. I mean, I can't stand it now. I really can't. You know me. I drink very rarely, like very rarely. Genuinely, I would say I probably drink, like have a drink, right? And I'm talking like a beer, maybe like once every 3 months, something like that. Like, because it's just not a part of my life. But then every so often, if I do go out and I get drunk because I go out with a group of friends or something like that, and I'm hungover the next day, I fucking hate it, mate. I hate it because I'm well aware.
He says this, guys, ladies and gentlemen. I've seen this guy drinking Sambuca for breakfast before.
Oh yeah, it tastes like licorice. Love it.
It was, well, just to put a bit of context around that, it was Ouzo and it was in Santorini. It was Ouzo? No, it was Raki.
Raki. Yeah, Raki. Raki,
that's it. The locals whilst we were speaking at a retreat. So I'll let you off for that one.
They insisted, and we thought we got to be part of the culture. But no, but you know, even if I'm hungover once, mate, I hate it because I know I've just wasted a fucking solid 24 hours where I could be working on my business, working on my mindset, fucking developing myself, and that time is valuable. Way more valuable than the fucking night out I just had or the fucking crazy experiences we had that we thought were crazy, but instead we're just bumbling around nightclubs drunk. It's just like, it's just fucking not worth it, right? Yeah. And That's whether or not you do it on a small scale or on a big scale. And at the end of the day, people are listening to this podcast because they want to know, what are the things that I should avoid if I want to be successful? We had to talk about it because
Yeah.
without a doubt, regardless of what level we're talking about, whether it's extreme, whether it's just fucking occasional, it will inhibit your success in one way or another.
Well, I've got a little interesting enough. I used to do Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and Narcotics Anonymous meetings when I came out of rehab. And that was the extent, guys. I was in rehab for 6 months, fully intensive rehabilitation treatment center. I then did drug and alcohol meetings every single day for 3 months, sometimes even 3 a day. I was obsessed with it, essentially, because I'm always immersive when I do something, and it typically works quite well for me, actually. So, but in Alcoholics Anonymous, they define an alcoholic as somebody who alcohol has cost them more than money. Simple as that.
Wow.
So if alcohol has cost you a friendship, a job, your health, then you're an alcoholic, because you are reliant on alcohol so much that it's taking you away from things that are important to you, sort of thing. And you can be and there's women who drink 2 glasses of wine a night, and they're fully fledged alcoholics because they need those 2 glasses of wine to function, not necessarily even physically dependent. Maybe they would get withdrawals, but maybe just psychologically. Maybe they get to the end of the day and all they can think about at 5 o'clock at the end of the shift at work is going home and having a glass of wine. When your mind is reliant on alcohol and you cannot live without alcohol, even if it's because it's not because you're sitting on the streets begging, it's because you've had to stop off at Waitrose on the way home because you need that bottle of wine, even though you're late for dinner. You still have to, because you need that bottle of wine before you go home. That's an alcoholic. And it's crazy because not many people identify with that.
Yeah, loads of people will recognize that, though, that feeling and that need, and I've known loads of people throughout my life like that, tons, that wouldn't consider themselves alcoholics, but they are in that sense. Another term as well, the functioning alcoholic. The person who can get absolutely bladdered drunk on those 2 or 3 fucking bottles of wine every single night, get up the next morning, feel okay, and go to work or run a business and perform at a decent level. But that's still not good. That is still not fucking good. That even though you're functioning, the sheer fact that that's a part of your being and that's a part of your life and your day and your evening, that is inhibiting you in a massive way.
Have you seen the film Flight with Denzel Washington?
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of lines and a vodka orange to set him off for his plane journey in the morning.
I know. Fucking,
it's not necessarily something to be laughed at, but there is some comedy in there, I guess, somewhere.
It's crazy, isn't it? So anyway, for the first one on this list, drugs and alcohol, right? Whether we're talking about a little or we're talking about a lot, if you want to be successful, which we know you do, we know, right? We know that by putting those things to one side and focusing on yourself and focusing on your identity and who you really are and understanding yourself and getting to know yourself, that is going to contribute towards your success way more than drugs and alcohol, right? So just please consider that when you're moving forward and trying to make a success of yourself and of your life. This next one can be intrinsically linked to drugs and alcohol in some respects, but also is one that really stands on its own as well. Staying stuck in one environment. Now, staying stuck in one environment, I can imagine, contributes in a big way to the drugs and alcohol problem, but let's separate it. Let's talk about staying stuck in one environment just entirely on its own. I'll give you a little story of my own with this, right? Of course, I run a very successful business that me and Lewis run together, the Coaching Masters. I have a lot of freedom. Our whole business is run from our laptops and from our phones, which is a fucking dream come true when you really think about it, considering all of the jobs and shitty experiences we've had throughout our life. And still, I like to make the point of changing my environment whenever I can. And I do it in a really small, very quaint way that makes a massive difference to my week. Every single Friday, I have no calls booked on a Friday. And every Friday, I get the earliest train that I can from right outside my front door, Lower Sydenham train station, all the way into London. Well, I say all the way, it's only 15 minutes into London Bridge. And I spend all day in the city, going to various different coffee shops, and I work from these different coffee shops. It's a very small, quaint change of environment, but it makes a fucking huge difference to my week because I spend the rest of the week working from home, which I'm very lucky to do that. Mm-hmm. But I need to get out the house once a week to change that environment, because changing your environment changes so much about what you're thinking and what you're feeling and the amount of work you can get done and your effectiveness and your perception. My perception changes on a Friday just because I'm in a different environment. And I think it's a very important thing for people to do, even if it's on a small scale like that, right?
Yeah, so you can obviously make the smaller changes in that just to sort of mix things up a little bit. And that's about, changing even the position of your environment to release energy and just to feel a little bit more productive and in flow. And that's the sort of power of even micro changes to your environment. But on a much larger scale as well, and a sort of a different point is we talk about a lot about limiting beliefs in coaching. Limiting beliefs are strongly held opinions. They're things that people believe to be true. The worst thing about limiting beliefs are the fact that they limit us. They stop us from going after things. But the real worst thing about it is we don't know that they're limiting beliefs. We think they're facts. We actually do believe they're true, even though they are just opinions. Limiting beliefs can sometimes come from like yourself. They can come from your family, your friends, but they can come from societal conditioning. They can also come from your lovely little village. You can come from what your auntie says down the post office and what Tim says from the butcher. And the reason why people stay stuck, and you typically find that people in sort of small villages typically just sort of do the same thing and never really venture out of those places, is because they're all feeding off the same thoughts and beliefs and values and opinions. And if you never get the opportunity to explore different perspectives, you never have the opportunity to challenge what you know, and therefore you never have any opportunity to uncover the beliefs that are limiting you and decide whether or not they're serving you, and decide to swap that for a more empowering belief that may move you in a better direction, that's more helpful and more useful for you as an individual, rather than just what's being presented to you by Tim down the butchers. So if you move yourself into different cultures, different countries, even different cities, different towns, different circles of friends, you'll start to go, oh, you do things like that. That's interesting. Tim from the butcher doesn't do it like that, and you start to be able to challenge those things and see different, perspectives of life and the world and yourself. And it opens you up to just a more of an abundance of living and expressing yourself as a human. It's pretty big.
Yeah, it's pretty big. And it keeps reflecting back to that word that we talk about all the time, perspective. It is all about shifting your perspective. And that's why we'll come back to it, because that's a huge part of coaching. We're trying to get people to change their perspective, to be able to see something from a different angle, from a different position, through different eyes, in a different light. And one of the best ways of being able to do that in your life is by changing your environment. Because then you get to experience those different perspectives. Like you said, Lewis, whether it's a different culture, whether it's a different race, a different religion, or just a different group of friends, always strive to change your environment wherever you can, whether it be on like a micro level, like I was talking about earlier, just going somewhere else to be able to change your own perspective because you're seeing different things and you're hearing different things, or on a massive level where you literally jump on a fucking airplane and you go to a different country for a year. Right. It's joked about a lot, isn't it? Oh, I'm going to go somewhere to find myself. But really, that's no joke. Like, it's a serious thing. If you're able to do that, right, and which everybody is able to do that, you just got to find a way of doing it. Go and jump on that plane, right? Go to that different culture, go to that different place, expand your perspective. You can guarantee there's one thing that successful people are very good at. They're very good at expanding their perspective. They don't have that fixed mindset, and they're not utterly convinced that there's only one way of doing something. They know that there are multiple ways of doing the same thing, and they want to know all of those multiple ways. And you can only do that by shifting your perspective and going to a different environment. It's a massive contributing factor towards success.
I guarantee it's Tim from the butchers that are saying shit like that, because they're stuck in one environment and they just can't even comprehend the possibility of being able to explore yourself or find yourself or do some soul searching. That just stuff, that seems like mumbo jumbo to them. So they devalue it, and then it reinforces it. And then that's the problem.
We've reached a point in our life now where it seems very unusual to me that people wouldn't want to do that. That I find really amusing. Like, let alone people ridiculing it. It does not process in my head. It's like, you do realize that's literally what life is for, right? To soul search, to find yourself, to love as much as you can, to build relationships, to shift your perspective, to have as many experiences as possible, to genuinely help people. Like, you do realize that is life. The one perspective that you've got from that one village you grew up in and that one person you talk to, you do surely realize that's not life. But we've come to discover that isn't the opinion of the masses, is it?
It's not necessarily the opinions. They when you say you do realize this, right? The reality is they don't realize that because the thing is they've never experienced it. Yeah, they've never seen it. Therefore, they don't believe it. They don't think it's true. They've only ever seen Tim from the butchers and Nina from the fucking chip shop, and they don't see people outside. You know, they are like surprised when someone breaks away, when someone has some sort of form of success, because they're so used to sort of living within that bubble, and they haven't seen a perspective. They haven't seen any success. They haven't seen anything else because they've just been keeping themselves to themselves, kind of thing, and never seeing anything different. Therefore, because they haven't seen it, they don't believe it. So you have to be the one that breaks away, guys. If you're the one that's like, I've been stuck in my environment for a while, and actually, who knows what sort of beliefs I've got. Step into a new environment and see what comes up. Maybe you might do a bit of soul searching. Maybe you might find yourself.
Make the effort to do that as well. For everybody listening to this, make the effort to change your environment. First on a small scale, if need be, and then on a much, much bigger scale. The next one's interesting. And this is one that we see a lot of, isn't it? People simply not making decisions. Such an inhibitor to success, isn't it? Like we have come to discover decisions need to be made every day on mass scale really quickly, right? And we're not talking about not putting a lot of thought into it. You still got to put a lot of thought into it, but fuck me, you have to make decisions, right? If you want to be successful. And not making decisions has got to be one of the biggest inhibitors of success, simply because when you're finding yourself at a crossroad, whether it be once a week or fucking 10 times a day, if you don't make a decision whether you're going to turn left or right, what's going to happen? You're not going to go anywhere. You're going to remain stuck. So if making a decision is something you try to avoid, something you've got a problem with, being stuck is going to be a big, big part of your reality. You have to start getting used to making decisions on a daily basis, right?
So I want to share with everyone listening the main reason why people don't make decisions. And that is because they are scared of making the wrong decision. And it's always that. I don't want to make the wrong decision. Scared of making the wrong decision. Now, this is going to blow your mind because you may not have realized this before, but there is no such thing as right decisions and there's no such thing as wrong decisions. There are only just decisions, because you can never know if it's the right or wrong one, because you don't know what's going to happen after that scenario. You don't know whose perspective, it is. You might go for you might make a decision to go for a job that pays you 100 grand a year as a CEO, and someone might go, wow, what an amazing decision. You're like this hugely successful, like city slicker corporate CEO, like 9 to 5, stable career. Well done. That's amazing. You might get someone else going, oh, mate, you're joking. You've just gone and signed your fucking life away and working for somebody else. What, for that amount of money? Jesus, what you look at you like being controlled by someone else. Why don't you do your own thing? Why don't you do something you're passionate about? Create something that's going to leave a legacy. It's a perspective. So there's never really a right or wrong. It's a matter of, it depends on who's looking at it, but you don't know what's going to happen. A decision that's right today may be wrong tomorrow. A decision that was wrong today might be right tomorrow. Like, I'll give you an example. 3 months in to my university degree, I quote unquote dropped out. I made a decision to, didn't want to do it. Didn't think it was the right vehicle for me. By the time everyone had finished their university degree, I'd built a very, very successful business, because I did a year in college doing an access course to be able to get me into university. That was a very difficult process. I had a criminal record, had to go on a panel, got in, did the loan, did 3 months in, and then left. Most people would have been like, made the wrong decision there, mate. You done so well. You was doing so, you come so far. Why don't you just carry on? Yeah. Little did they know, best decision I ever made. I mean, my backstory, everything I'd ever done, prison, crime, of course, wrong decision, or right, bad decision, or whatever at the time, but ended up being like this huge learning that's enabled me to change thousands of people's lives, and like a significant story that allows me to connect with people and be memorable as well. People, remember the story of a, convicted criminal turned coach, don't they? This thing that was obviously a bad decision, but was it?
That's the thing, isn't it? Ownership is the thing that comes to the forefront of this, because one thing that you need in order to be successful is ownership over what it is you're doing and yourself. And a decision can only be a bad decision if you don't take any ownership over what happens next, right? You can make decisions that in that immediate moment will be seen as really bad decisions. Like you're saying, some of the ones that you've made in the past, right, that had put you in a bad place in that immediate moment was a bad decision. But taking the ownership over what happens next, that is the thing that will either make you successful or unsuccessful, not the decision itself. The decision itself isn't the thing that's going to make you or break you. It's the amount of ownership you take over the decision after the decision has been made. And that decision could be good or bad. It all comes down to what you do with it. Talking about university, there was a time where I'd been offered a part in a BBC drama, a TV series, and it was going to be my first speaking role, right? And it was on a drama called The Crimson Field. And it was like this World War I drama, right? And the day that they were filming, I was due to do this assessment, right, in drama school, right? This shitty, fucking pointless assessment for movement class where they took actual drama school level students and on stage in front of 4 people were being aeroplanes and being cats and being dogs, right, to express this movement. And I was like, oh, by the way, I've just got this part in this TV series. And my tutor was like, well, you can't do it because you've got that assessment. And he was like, well, folded his arms, you've got a decision to make. You've either got to go and do that or you've got to do this assessment. I was like, mate, it's not even a decision. Like, I'm here to learn how to be an actor and I've just been offered this fucking part on the BBC. I'm obviously going to go and do that, right? And in his perception, it was the wrong decision because I was going to get no grades on this fucking assessment that didn't mean anything to anyone, that contributed towards my acting degree, which doesn't mean anything to anyone because really what I'm trying to achieve is the ability to go and act. So of course, what did I do? I made the decision to go and fucking do the drama, and it was one of the best experiences I've ever had. It was a great part. And having that in my show reel contributed in a big way to other parts that I got. But it's funny, isn't it? Is it how perception contributes?
And I guess you didn't need to know any acting of how to be a cat anyway.
I've never needed to be an aeroplane once in the professional world of acting. I can tell you that right now. Maybe the color purple a couple of times, but never a fucking airplane. So to me, in my perception, in my world, it was an easy decision. In his perception, it was the wrong decision. So what does that tell us? The decision itself has nothing to do with it. It's what you do with that decision afterwards. It's the ownership you take, right?
Like everything has benefits and negatives, positives and negatives, and, pluses and minuses. And it's about it's again, perspective. It's about what you see. Like you can choose to take the good out of any decision, even if it wasn't necessarily the thing that you thought it was, or was going to take you closer to the thing that you wanted. Even if it took you away, you can make another decision to take another step closer towards it. So you're always in control. But like Liam said earlier, if you're standing on the side of a street and you want to either move right or left and you don't make a decision, then you just stay stuck. That's what happens when you don't take decisions, guys. You stay stuck. You don't move forward. Even if you're making the wrong decisions, you're moving forward because you're learning what doesn't work. You're learning things that are going to just pivot you in a slightly different direction, but you're zigzagging, but you're still moving forward, right? Rather than staying stuck. And just to finish this point off, truly, the only wrong decision you can ever really make is not making a decision at all.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. It's the same aspect of people saying, well, I don't want to try because I might fail, right? It's an automatic fail if you don't participate, and it's an automatic fail if you don't make a decision. So you might as well have made the wrong decision. There is no such thing as that. Make a fucking decision. Please, everybody listening to this.
I love how you said that because it leads us perfectly on to the next one. So you said about the fear of failing, and we're moving on to being scared of everything. This is another thing. Do these things and you'll never be successful. If you're scared of everything, you're in trouble. Because the reason why fear, again, is paralyzing. Like we need to grow, develop, move, change, move in different directions, move closer to where we need to be. We need to move in order to be able to get closer to things, progression. It involves movement. And if you're paralyzed through fear, then you're not going to get very far. So fear is one of the biggest things that hold people back, being scared of everything. And it is just an illusion, isn't it? Like we speak about this a lot. Fear is merely an illusion. Everyone's always looking on the surface. They're looking at the symptomatic type things that are happening, and the events that are occurring, and they believe that they're scared of those things. But when you really start to tap in a little bit deeper, you realize that those things aren't scary at all. Like the amount of people we speak to, and that, you know, and people may not know this unless you're in the online space, but there's this common fear amongst the online community, I guess you could say, of the dreaded Facebook Live. Like until I got into this sort of line of work, I didn't realize how much of a fear that was, because everyone's sort of keeping it to themselves, and if they're scared of it, they just won't do one, right? But
Yeah.
when you start to speak to people that are looking to put themselves out there and market themselves, you start to realize that they actually have this fear of it. And I
Mm.
was so shocked when I had see how many times it came up over and over again. And but are they actually fearful of a Facebook Live? Because I mean, what is a Facebook Live? It's a social media platform. It's a bit of technology. It's like some, you know, digital representation of a human on a screen. Is that scary, or is there something else far deeper that they're really scared of?
Absolutely, because fear lives in the future. You know, it lives in the future. It cannot live in the present because you're fearful of something that may happen. So we hide that behind this guise of, oh, it's the Facebook Live that I'm scared of. But like you said, that's just this digital representation of a bit of technology. So we know there's always something deeper. There's always something that needs to be uncovered. People don't want to be rejected. They don't want their affections to be damaged. They don't want to be seen as unlovable or unlikable. They don't want to be vulnerable. They don't want to put themselves in a position that their amygdala thinks is a fucking dangerous position, which is that part of the brain that says you're in danger. Fear is this really intrinsic emotion that people feel and have felt since the dawn of man. But it's the understanding around what we're really scared of that people tend to totally lack. You know, they just feel the fear and they're like, fuck, I don't like this. I don't want to be feeling this way. So I'm going to avoid whatever makes me feel that way, without actually uncovering what those things are that are creating that sense of fear.
Because I guess people haven't thought of that before, but that the fear is designed to keep us safe, you know, to prevent us from just walking into danger and jumping off a cliff or starting, like, you know, playing about with a saber-toothed tiger or something, right? But we live in a much less chaotic time now where we don't really experience much real danger on a day-to-day basis. So we've become quite soft in a sense where we've just latched on to the closest things that we perceive as danger and still get scared of them. So, you know, back in the day, a saber-toothed tiger might be the thing you're scared of, and a Facebook Live would probably be very insignificant. However, now, because there's no saber-toothed tiger, instead we just latch on to the closest thing we can, and we think that it's the Facebook Live. So it's an illusion of fear. It's an illusion of danger, but you are safe. So that's the first affirmation I'd like you to give yourself. I am safe. There is nothing to be scared of. But of course, that's not going to do the trick, because there's something far deeper that you have to tap into if you really want to break this down. So Liam alluded to it there. The unlovable, the rejection. What really happens when you're fearful of something on the surface? Is it saying something about you? And that's the fear, you know. Will I be rejected, humiliated, embarrassed? You know, these things don't feel good. And the reality is you've felt like that at some point in your past, and it felt horrible, and you never want to feel like that again. You've been rejected once, you've been humiliated once, you've been rejected once, and you made a decision subconsciously, I won't be fucking putting myself in that situation again, because that hurt. That really hurt. So I'll avoid everything I can to not feel like that again. So if that Facebook Live, and this is happening subconsciously, guys, you don't even know what's happened. If that Facebook Live could potentially make me feel rejected again, then I'm just not going to do it in the first place. That keeps me safe. That keeps me away from danger, although it's an illusion. But then I want you to break it down even further. What does even, you know, rejection, like, so what? Rejection, embarrassment, disappointment, humiliation, like, so what? Well, why is that an issue? Like, why? Ask yourself the question, guys. Why do you feel being rejected? Because again, it says something about you. What does it say? I'm not enough. I'm not enough in some way. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not smart enough, or I'm not good enough, or I'm just not enough. Like the amount of people that say I'm just not enough. You're like, enough of what? They've just got this blanket generalization that just, I am not enough. And that doesn't feel good, to not be enough as a human being, you know, not being, you know, a complete and well-rounded person on this planet. It's, you know, a very insecure, deep sense of depression with the feeling of not being enough as a human. So of course, fearful of that.
What we need to do is look behind the curtain. You know, the image that I get when we talk about this is like Oz, you know, in the Wizard of Oz. There's this big, scary, powerful master of the universe who is Oz, and everyone's really fearful of him. But actually, when you just look behind the curtain, it's this just funny little man with a machine who's projecting this huge image of this powerful person. And the immediate moment you pull the curtain back and you look behind the curtain and you see how insignificant that thing is that you've just been scared of. This is the thing that we need to do with our fears. We need to look behind the curtain and see what's really behind the fear, because you can guarantee every time you do that, you come to discover that the thing that you were scared of, that you thought you were scared of, is way more insignificant than the image that it projected before. So we've got to look inside. Got to look behind the curtain, and we do that by asking ourselves those questions. What is it that I'm really scared of? I know it's not a fucking Facebook Live. I know that, right? So in that case, what is it that I'm scared of? Is it that I'm scared of being rejected? Is it that I'm scared of getting a little bit of hate? Or is it scared of me being vulnerable or just opening up myself for criticism? In that case, where does that fear come from? Is that something that's been given to me? Is that something that's been said to me? Is that something that I've taken from someone else because I've witnessed something? And in that case, what is it that I really want in this situation? Do I want to go and do that Facebook Live because I've got a lot of value to give? What are my skills? What are my attributes? Are there people in my life that do love me, that aren't going to hurt me? We need to fucking draw back the curtain as much as we possibly can to see that actually our fears, much like that Wizard of Oz, is just this tiny little insignificant thing that we can quite easily crush or accept or throw to one side, or maybe even give some love and attention to. But we got to be fucking pulling back the layers, right? We got to try to be looking inside of ourselves to discover what is really going on and creating that fear instead of just taking it on face value.
Because you mentioned pulling back the layers there and getting to the, you know, the real bottom of it. And there is, and you also mentioned, you know, are there people that love me? And that is the solution, because I'm under the firm belief that the symptomatic event that occurs is never scary. The way that makes you feel about yourself in terms of the fear of being potentially rejected, embarrassed, humiliated and stuff is getting deeper. That, if you're rejected, embarrassed, humiliated, making you feel not enough, is getting deeper. But even then, it's like, well, why do you want to be enough? Ask yourself the question, why is it so important for you to feel enough? Why is it so painful for you to feel like you are not enough? And that's simply because you want to be loved. Because if you're not enough, you won't be loved. Everyone wants to be loved. You want to be loved. I want to be loved. Liam wants to be loved. We all want to be loved, whether you admit it or not. And the reality is that's where it stems from. Because if you're not loved and you're not looked after, you're not protected, you may be outcasted. And then again, you're in danger. These are these innate, like instinctive type patterns that are happening for us that we're completely unaware of. We look at a Facebook Live and we think, oh my God, imagine that. Not one time do we think, well, what is it that I'm actually scared of? Is it actually the people on the Facebook Live that are watching it? Right. And why am I scared of that? Well, because they might laugh at me. Why? Because then I might not feel enough. Why? Because I just want to be loved, man. Then if you realize what the real problem is, then you can tackle that. And you can do that by a few things. One, love yourself, and then you don't need anyone else to love you. Two, bring your attention to the people that already love you, because it's so easy to look at everything you haven't got and feel like you're not enough and not loved when there's a host of people around you that love you anyway. And then above all, look at the symptomatic surface level scenario of this false fear and this illusion of fear, and look at it and go, that's not scary. And that doesn't matter, because I am enough and I am loved. And regardless of what happens here, regardless of the Facebook Live or, you know, the girl that I ask out, or the message to someone on Facebook, or the promotion that I want to ask my boss for, regardless of what they say, whether they say no, whether they say go away, whether they laugh at me, whether I'm disappointed, I am enough and I am loved. And as long as you can affirm those things yourself and believe those things and feel those things, everything that happens on the surface won't matter. And more importantly, won't seem scary.
Ladies and gentlemen, alcohol and drugs will inhibit your success. Staying stuck in one environment will inhibit your success. Not making decisions will most definitely inhibit your success. And so will being scared and fearful of things that are not going to hurt you. They're not going to damage you. And actually, you are enough. You have enough. You are loved enough. And go out there and be successful and stop letting these things hold you back. And that has been the trilogy of Do These Things and You'll Never Be Successful. Ladies and gentlemen, if this is the first episode that you've heard, go back and listen to the other two, listen to the whole trilogy, and make sure that you avoid every single thing that me and Lewis have been talking about over these 3 episodes.